in this knowledge we will see in Linux services. So before we begin, let's like always take a look at knowledge etiquettes. So always be punctual, always join like 5 minutes before the session start time, and after the session always leave a constructive feedback, and keep your devices on mute so that we do not face any unwanted disturbance. And yes, always unmute yourself if you have any questions. So the agenda will be like we will take a look at daemon services, systemd, and we will also see like service management and troubleshooting, and of course a demo for everything else. So first of all, what are daemon services, right? So if we go by the definition, right, then daemon is a process that runs in the background, and it supervises the system or provides functionality to other processes. Okay, so what happens is that in Linux, whenever, so before that, let's see what's a process, right? So we know that a process is like a instance of a running program. So whenever you start any program, and then a process comes in the background, right? So in Linux, whenever you start a program, a corresponding process will come into play, and whenever you close that program, that process will also be killed, right? In fact, uh, right now as we are watching this Nolex on WebEx, or you can say Chrome browser, then there must be some services for the Chrome browser running in the background, right? So if I open the terminal, and if I show you, so we can even see the processes. So if we do ps hyphen aux, then you will see that I have all these processes running, right? So they get booted, right? Like they get started whenever you like turn on your system, right? Because some of them are like system services. So let's take an example. Okay, let's start this calculator. Okay, now I have this calculator open. Now I will run this command again, but this time I will filter for calculator. So let's find calculator in that list. So if I do that, you will see that I got two responses. First one is the genome calculator, which is this, the application which I opened, and second one is the grep, right? Because I used grep, right? So it's a process, right? So it gave you two processes. So now let's remove this. Okay, so I killed the calculator. Now let's do this again. Now you will see that that genome calculator, it is gone. Now you only have one. And if I open this again and try it one more time, you will see that it is back. So here we prove that whenever you open a program, it will start a process, and whenever you close it, it will remove that process. Now you must be wondering that when we ran this command, then there were a lot of processes, right? And as you can see, I clearly do not have those many applications. I only have 5, right? Then what are these, right? So these are like daemons, right? So they are running in background and doing what like they are supposed to do. For example, ssh, right? So if I grab for ssh, you will see that it is actually here, right? Ssh. So yeah, let me move back. And so yeah, so it's a process which runs in the background. So now actually what happens is so whenever to understand this, we need to understand how a Linux boots up. So if I tell you like how it boots up, so whenever you turn on your system, there is a like process which follows. For example, it calls the BIOS, then it calls the MBR, then grub, the kernel, the systemd, and targets. So as you can see, the kernel calls the systemd. So systemd is like a master daemon, right? So it owns all those processes we just saw, right? So kernel calls the systemd. Now systemd is it has two jobs, right? First of all, it's a Linux initialization system, and also it's a service manager. Now I'm not saying that this is the only initialization system, like there can be more, right? So for example, there is init, right? Previously we used to use init. So init, the drawback with that was that it used to start those processes in a serial manner, or like you can say it was not very optimized. So due to that, your booting process was very long, right? And if we take an example of Ubuntu, then Ubuntu used upstart as an initialization system for a long time. But if you consider any latest Linux distro, then you will find systemd there, right? So it's the master daemon, right? So it's the first thing which gets started whenever you turn on your system. So if I do a ps tree here, right? PS is process and tree, so it will give you a tree like structure of the processes. So let's do that. And if I scroll up, you will see that systemd is itself the very first process, right? And every other process is branching out from it, right? And this process, it's called forking. So whenever a parent process creates some child processes like this, then it's called a forking, right? And you see a D, right? D here, system D, ACPI D, bold D, colored D. So this D stands for daemon. Okay, so these are like your daemon services, right? And since this is the first process which is started, it will have the process ID of 1. So if I again do ps hyphen aux, and if I scroll up, you will see that the first process has the process ID of 1. So this is your systemd. Now in this session, I'm going to make you the master of systemd, right? So systemd, like it controls the processes, but using systemd you can like control those processes as well. So for that, systemd has a few tools, right? So as we know that systemd has two jobs, right? First is the initialization, which we already talked about. So whenever you start the system, it will execute all the like services which need to be executed. And it also serves as the purpose of service manager. Okay, so we will see now how we can manage those services. Okay, so for that we have a command called systemctl. So syntax is like this: systemctl, then your command, and then the name of the service. So let's say I want to check if docker is running or not. So you can do systemctl status and docker, and it will show you that docker is running, right? It is active, running, and it is also enabled. So what enabled means is that whenever my system restarts, right, docker will start automatically, right? So let's say we want to stop docker. Okay, so for that we can again use systemctl, sudo systemctl. We will do stop, and we will do docker. So when you do this, and now if we try to check the status again, you will see that docker is inactive. In fact, it is dead, right? Because it is not running right now. So let's start this again. To start it, simply again sudo systemctl start docker. So now if I check the status, you will see that now it is running again, right? And enabled as well. So what if we want to do a restart, right? Which is essentially a stop and a start. So again, for that you can do systemctl restart docker, and it will restart docker for you, right? And there's one more option. For example, what if you do not want to restart the service, but you just want to reload the configuration? So let's say there were some configuration changes, and you want to reload those, right? So for that you can do systemctl reload docker, and it will reload the configurations, right? And now not like every daemon service supports this reload, right? So there is a way to deal with this. So for that you can do sudo systemctl, and you can do a command like reload hyphen or hyphen restart docker. So what it will do is, whatever service name you give, it will first try to reload it, and if it doesn't support reloading, then it will restart it. So it's a handy command if you do not know whether a service supports reloading the configuration or not. And there, right? So we looked at like how to check the status, right? And how to start, stop, restart, or reload it, right? So this is like the basic service management. But let's move a step further, right? So how do we check if it is running, right? So we did systemctl status docker, and then we saw that okay, it is active, right? So this was manual. But what if you want to automate this, right? What if you want to like let's say you do not want to check manually, and you have some server and you want to like check if docker is running there or not, and you will not like go there and check, right? So for that you also have a shorthand for that. For the shorthand you can do systemctl, and you can do is active, is active docker, and it will tell you right away, right? It is active. It will just tell you it is active, so you don't have to see that, right? And you can obviously capture this in some variable, and you can verify whether docker is running there or not, like that's one way. And now if I stop this systemctl stop docker, and now if you see is active, it will show you inactive. So now it is inactive. So let's start this again. Similarly, you have what if you want to check if it is enabled or not? So which means whether it will automatically start whenever your system loads or not. So for that again, you have another shorthand which is enabled. See, it will show you it is enabled. If it is not enabled, it will show you disabled here, right? So now we know like now we know how to manage the services. But what if we want to see logs of a service, right? So for example, I have in Nginx, right? So systemctl status in Nginx. So right now Nginx is active running and it is disabled, right? So what if I want to know like what's happening, right? Or what if your system like you are unable to start Nginx? So when you do systemctl start Nginx, it fails with an error, right? So what will you do in that situation? So uh, systemd also has another like command line tool called generalctl. Okay, and using that you can check the logs. So if I do generalctl -xe, right, you will see that the things which I was doing just now, those were captured here, right? So if you see here, like you will see logs related to docker, right? Because I was starting and stopping docker, so you will see that it is starting up, right? Docker.service has finished successfully, right? So all these logs you can find here. And right, and as you know that there is a like you must notice that it is written as a unit docker.service, right? So what's this unit docker.service? So it is nothing but your daemon service, right? But there is a like a small thing to know so this is its full name. Okay, docker.service. So what happens is whenever you do systemctl status docker, so systemd automatically understands, okay, so he means docker.service. Okay, so it is like its second name. So docker is the first name, service is the second name. So it will like know, like okay, it is he's referring to docker.service. Okay, and what's a unit? So what happens is let's say I want to check all the daemon service, right? So for that So as I told you that systemd is the parent, right? So it doesn't call its child daemon processes as processes. Okay, it calls them units. So similarly, if someone is named, let's say, Ashutosh, then his parents might be calling him Ashu as a short form, right? Or you might have some other nickname. So similarly, systemd calls its child processes as units. Okay, so if I want to see how like which units are running, you can do systemctl, and you can do something like list units. So when you do, you will see a huge list, right? Unit, and all these units, and along with the status, like whether it is active or inactive, right? And now there are like a few types of units, right? So as I told you, the last name is like this, dot and something. So this list is about the devices. Okay, so these are the daemon processes for the devices, because they all have a dot device. But if I scroll down, you will see that now we are talking about the mount, right? Dot mounts. And if I scroll down more, path, scope, and here is your services. So these are your service types. Okay, so like a Docker, Nginx. So these were your services. So these are the like different type of units or daemon processes that systemd is managing, and services are just one of them. So as you can see, you have a cron dot service, right, for the cron jobs. You also have a Bluetooth like service. So what if you don't want to see all this list? What if you want to filter this? So for this you can do systemctl list hyphen units. You can do hyphen t for the type, and you can give it service. So it will only tell you the service types and not anything else, right? All of these are services, and it is showing you that right now 77 loaded units are there. And it is also showing you the status, like they are active or not, and they are whether they are like running or exited. What's the status? Okay, now if you have any questions, you can ask me till now.
Anybody, any questions so far?
Okay, looks like
Daemon
no
thread
questions. Hmm.
daemon thread is a low priority thread, or it have certain priority over system related threads.
Okay, you mean daemon process, systemd process?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's the first process. So it's the initialization system, right? So whenever the kernel like after the kernel, like kernel will call the systemd, right? So here you see kernel executes etc systemd. So after the kernel is loaded, it will first call the systemd. So this is the very first thing, right? That is why it has PID 1. So it is the very first thing which will start.
How does it manage the priority in the thread, or does it face the problem of starvation?
Starvation. No, because there is nothing else, right? So it is only calling the systemd, right? So this will be like the first thing will start, and after this, like it will fork more processes. So at this point, there is no starvation. There may be starvation after this point, right? When there are more processes, but at this point, there is no starvation.
Okay, thank you. With
Yeah, yeah. So if I go to systemd, right? So this was the the thing which kernel was starting, and this is the systemd folder. And if you go inside system, yep. So here you will see that it has some files related to those, like services and everything else, right? So this is what the kernel is calling, right? And you can even you can do maybe, so you can also check a user level. So if I go to user, and if I go to lib and systemd, right? And if I, so this is my user level, yep. So if you go inside the user level systemd, you will see that all these like daemon services which we listed earlier, right? So it has the sockets, it's socket type daemon, service type daemon, type daemon, or like mounting type daemons. On it will show you all the user level daemons, right? So if you want to create your own like service file, then like this is where you will put it, right? So you can even create, so let's say you have a war file, right? Let's say a Jenkins war file. So, and if you want to start it every time the system restarts, so there are a couple of ways, but one way is to like write a service file for that. So you can write a service file for that, and you can set it to enable, again using systemctl enable and the service name, right? And it will like start whenever your system whenever your system restarts. Service, yep. So this was it. I hope you like this session. If you have any queries here or after the session, you can always ask me or message me.
All right. So thanks, Mohit. Is there any question that we may have? Yes, we have a couple of minutes. We can ask our questions right now. All right. So it seems we do not have any questions. So thanks, Mohit, for this wonderful session. I'm sure we all have learned something else, something extra, and something more here today through your expert lenses. And as it goes, everyone, two things very important to follow and adopt to. One is after the session, it is very important for all of us to share the learning experience because it helps us to define and create the skeleton for our next sessions. Now, the second important thing is that everything that we learn, we must try to execute our learning into action. So try to find out avenues, ways, platforms wherein you can practice this learning because the more you practice, the more expertise you hold in the end. So with that, thank you so much. We see each other again in the next session. So till then, happy learning. Bye bye.
Bye everyone. Thanks for joining.